Up next, Delaware Senator Joseph Biden, who held a news conference Wednesday to announce an end to his campaign for the presidency in 1988.
Hello, everybody. Delightful to see you all here. You know my wife, Jill. I'm going to make a brief statement. John Martillo of my staff will stay behind and answer any questions you have, and I'm going to go off and conduct a hearing. Would you close this door, please? 3.5 months ago, I announced my candidacy for President of the United States. And at that time, I did so because I believed, as I still believe now, that for 200 years, the persistent idea of our country that has characterized the journey of this nation has been that each generation has left behind a country a little bit better than the country that it inherited. I believed that then, and I believe that now. And I believed I could, and I still believe I will. Could, and I still believe I will make a difference in fulfilling that legacy. I know from campaigning, as sick as I, about the people of my age and what they're capable of, and those who are younger. I know that some cynics believe that people my age and those younger are short-sighted and selfish. Some are convinced that we no longer have that spark of idealism and compassion and conviction that marked the America of our youth. But I believe that that compassion, that idealism, still exists. Not to mention the commitment that I think that my generation and the younger generation have to their children. And quite frankly, in my zeal to rekindle that idealism, but now the exaggerated shadow of those mistakes has begun to obscure the essence of my candidacy and the essence of Joe Biden. And folks, I see my good friend Fritz Hollings over there. I've been here long enough to know that when the tide starts to roll, when things start to move, when things like this begin to happen, it requires all of one's time. It requires all of one's time, energy, and concentration to put it back on track. And it would require all the weeks ahead, and then who knows, maybe I would or would not be able to put it back on track. At the same time, somewhat coincidentally, at the same time, all of my energy and skill is required to deal with President Reagan's effort to reshape the Supreme Court in a way that I truly believe will be harmful for this country. And therefore, it seems to me I have a choice. I have to choose between running for president and doing my job to keep the Supreme Court from moving in a direction that I believe to be truly harmful. There will be other opportunities for me to campaign for president, but there will not be many other opportunities for me to influence President Reagan's choice on the Supreme Court. And although it's awfully clear to me what choice I have to make, I have to tell you honestly, I do it with incredible reluctance, and it makes me angry. I'm angry with myself for having been put myself in the position of having to make this choice. And I am no less frustrated with the environment of President. It's difficult to let the American people measure the whole Joe Biden and not just misstatements that I have made. But folks, be that as it may, I've concluded that I will stop being a candidate for President of the United States. I learned several other things from this whole experience. I learned that notwithstanding that honor and integrity, treating people honorably and acting with integrity count for a whole lot, even with your political opponents. Not a single public official who announced for me has withdrawn their support. And my colleagues in both political parties needed no explanation of my conduct before they immediately stood up and vouched for my honor, my integrity, and my credibility. And those who taught me in school, law school, those who went to school with me, law school, high school, and grade school, exact thing, notwithstanding the fact I was not the valedictorian. And I want to tell you and tell them that means more to me than they will ever know. I also want to thank those who have given so much of themselves to try to get me nominated this time. Those who helped me raise money, those who organized Iowa and New Hampshire and other parts of the country, and those who have done everything from lick envelopes to travel thousands of miles on my behalf. And most of all, I want to thank my Delaware for standing with me. Politics. One of you press folks asked me, he said, Biden, what's going to happen when the white-hot heat turns on? You warned me what it was going to be like. I thought I knew. It's a tough arena, but I'm a big boy. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But now it's time for me to do just had I not won in Iowa, just what I would have done had I lost on the convention floor. It's time for me It's time for me to assess my mistakes and make sure that I don't make them again. It's time for me to remind myself of why I got involved in politics in the first place. Because I believed, as I do now, that I can make a little bit of a difference. To use a Biden phrase that others seem to use these days, that I can bend history just a little bit. I still believe that. And for me, the next battle has already been engaged. For me, work to the Supreme Court would profoundly affect our future. I intend to be deeply involved in that battle. I intend to attempt to bring it to victory. And let me tell you folks one other thing. I still believe it's time to rekindle the spirit of idealism in this country. I think it's time for the world, once proud of what we stand for. I think it's time for the Democratic Party to demonstrate to the American people that we have that sense of idealism and we're not ashamed of it. And I think the Democratic Party will do that in 1988. But for me, the effort now shifts. First of all, to the Judiciary Committee and the Foreign Relations Committee and the great debates on the floor of the United States Senate. There will be other presidential campaigns, and I'll be there, Oliphant. I'll be there. There will be other opportunities in other places, other times, and I'll be there. And I'll be there seeking to share with all Americans and those who will stand with me the promise proclaimed in the communion hymn you've heard me recite all across this country. All across this country. And he will lift you up on eagle's wings, and bear you on the breath of dawn, and make the sun to shine on you. And I'm going to play a big part in doing it. But for now, folks, got to go handle the Bork hearings. I have no questions. I appreciate your consideration. I appreciate you being here. And lest I say something that might be somewhat sarcastic, I should go to the Bork hearing. Thanks, folks. My wife and I thank you very much. And Tommy, thanks for being here. Thanks. See you all later.
a number of campaign aides around: Tom Donlin, Tom Vallely, Bill Daley, Senator's sister Valerie, John Martilla, Mike Pryor. They'll be circulating around. John will take questions in general, but if you're looking for anybody in particular, I'm sure your favorite source is here.
Right. We will keep this brief, as we're somewhat stunned. We'll keep this brief, as we're somewhat stunned by this turnout. So, but we do have 10 or 15 key Senate aides and campaign aides who will be available for any questions. As I said, let me introduce one person to you, Valerie Biden Owens, Joe's sister, who is one of the campaign co-chairs, and we're about to take questions after this. Now, what we'd like to do is we'd like to break down into smaller groups if that's possible, but I understand it is a little crazy here, so we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have just for a little crazy here, so we'll be glad to answer any questions you might have just for a second. Well, during the past 5 or 6 days, Joe spent a lot of time with his family, and I think looking at the situation as carefully as he could. Last year, before Senator Biden made a final decision to run for president, one of the circumstances which we talked about at great length was the possibility that a new Supreme Court nominee would be announced during the course of the campaign. At that time, the decision was reached that if that became an eventuality, that the campaign activities would be suspended by and large, which has been the decision of the campaign, available or campaigning very actively for the past 30 or 45 days. So that put a very severe, had a very major impact upon the campaign. And then I think the events of the past week, which placed enough stress on a presidential campaign, and then I believe the exceptionally time-consuming and personally difficult, I think finally moved the senator and his family to decide that this was the best decision.
There's been a lot said that this, his departure was a result of an emphasis on character, in this campaign, and illustrated earlier by Senator withdrawal, without trying to draw that analogy too close, that there's been too much written about people's characters and personality, and whether that tends to distort the campaign.
Well, the larger question I guess we all have to ask ourselves, the press and people in politics, is whether the 10 minutes or 15 minutes of campaign activity, which have been zeroed in on so carefully over the past 10 days, are accurate reflections or representations of this campaign's conduct for the past year and his 15 years in the Senate. As Joe said, one of the most important and reassuring events was the tremendous levels of support he received from his colleagues, from the public officials who had endorsed him, and from all the people throughout this country who supported his presidential campaign. And there is no question, though, that this kind of news coverage, when it is focused on a candidate who is unknown to many Americans, can be very tough as a candidate is introduced to the people.
There was some thinking that this campaign was foundering even before the events of the past 10 days. If Senator Biden had done better in the early polls, would that have made a difference in his decision?
Well, let me give you the campaign view on that. We were absolutely delighted by our organizational development in Iowa. It was our view that we had the best campaign organization, the most impressive set of elected officials in Iowa. The poll results, we took 2 surveys during the course of this year. A survey in May before he announced, which had Joe predictably way back. And then we took another survey in early August, which showed that there were 4 candidates essentially competing for first place, and Senator Biden was one of them. Secondly, his general levels of approval were just wonderful. And we were delighted, we were very confident. Secondly, we had a terrific leadership structure in New Hampshire, and we were convinced that we were moving into a position of major competition. And finally, of course, we had the funds to wage this fight. Obviously, we were aware of some of the national... frankly, it just belied what we had as real information, our own survey research, and our own independent assessments of our true standing in Iowa and the potential of this candidacy. I don't think there's anybody inside this campaign who does not believe that Senator Biden could not have gone on to win Iowa, notwithstanding the events of the past few weeks.
There's been a lot of speculation that other Democratic campaigns were responsible for floating this. Is there, first of all, is there any bitterness within the Biden campaign towards any other particular camps?
None.
And second, what does this say about the state of the Democratic race?
I know I'm speaking for Senator Biden when I can say and assure all the other candidates that he's going to work mightily for the best interest of the Democratic Party. The stories about where these tapes came from or whatever, it's just not relevant to this situation.
What does it say about the Democratic Party, though, if indeed this was the case and that he was being cited?
Well, we don't know that it is. And Larry Raskey had a conversation last week with Mark Johnson, the Gebhardt press secretary, who spoke with this issue directly and said they were not involved. And that's who spoke with this issue directly and said they were not involved. And that's, we accept that at complete face value. We are absolutely not looking back. Joe is a very strong Democrat, and he will do everything he can to make sure we nominate the best candidate and also win the general election.
Senator Biden assessing the whole person, and I'm certain that Judge Bork's supporters, both on and off the Judiciary Committee, who have been making those same charges about unfairness to Judge Bork, will raise this issue, perhaps not in the Judiciary Committee itself. But what implication does? Is there a fair comparison of assessing the whole person in the evaluation of Judge Bork for the nomination of the Supreme Court?
Again, let me come back to you. I guess the question that we have debated private deliberations, is it fair these 10 minutes of campaign activity are used to characterize or represent not just the conduct of this campaign and Joe Biden as a presidential candidate, but his entire 15 years as a senator, a U.S. senator. And we don't think it is. That is not, and we don't think it is. That is not to say that some mistakes were made, which Joe readily owned up to. In specific response to your question, however, developments were not the most reassuring, but a source of great solace during all of this was the overwhelming support that Joe received from his Senate, colleagues, Democratic and Republican, including all those people who sit on the Judiciary Committee. It's very moving testimony because upon a 15-year association with him in the Senate, they know him to be a person of integrity and honor.
To my knowledge, the issue of unfairness has not been raised in the board hearing.
As a matter of fact, I think most people have commented that the campaigns have been run in a exceedingly fair-minded way.
John, you're concerned that if he stayed in and these stories kept being written, his political reputation would be irreparably damaged and he couldn't run again at a later time?
Many of us inside the campaign, and Joe and Senator Biden as well, were very tempted to continue this fight, to continue this campaign, and really take this to the people, and have them resolve all of these issues that have been raised. At the same time, the responsibilities associated with the Bork hearing weighed very, very heavily on Senator Biden, as I'm sure you all know. And I just believe he finally concluded he could not run a campaign, deal with the Bork hearings, and also deal with this set of events in the past 2 weeks. And he made the decision as he explained in his statement.
You said you had the funds to wage the fight. Could you tell us how much you did finally raise and why you couldn't just put the campaign on hold until the Bork hearings were over and then resume?
The decision to withdraw was Senator Biden's entirely. He solicited the advice of friends and allies throughout the country, but ultimately he made the decision on his own, and I'm sure he'll be available at more length, but that was his decision.
How much did you raise?
I'm not totally sure. We raised beyond.
$3.2 million through the end of June, I believe.
It was 3.2 million.
We don't have the new filing.
Right. And I'm sorry.
You had raised more money than anybody except the caucus, so
Right.
obviously there was support there. Had
Right.
that already begun to collapse? In
No,
terms of
because
raising?
the fundraising leadership around this country were very dedicated and reassured the campaign and Ted Kaufman that they were willing to keep on raising money, and we felt quite confident that we could continue to raise all the money that was necessary to wage a first-rate campaign. not as much as the Dukakis campaign, but we certainly felt that we were going to have a capacity to raise money.
Has there been a discussion of what would happen to the funds, how the funds would be disposed?
I'm not involved in that part of the decision.
Iowa, the last 2 days have shown a precipitous drop.
We began a survey on Monday night. The decision, I don't even know if the survey was complete. Senator Biden made this decision without the benefit of survey research, and I'm sure you all can understand that, and frankly, I have no idea the standing of the survey, whether it's complete or not complete or whatever.
Now, can you characterize the family's feelings right now? Was this a family decision? And the senator mentioned that he is a bit angry with himself. What about the family? Can you move over to the mic?
I can unequivocally speak for my family when I say that we have never been prouder of my brother first, Senator Biden second. Second. I think that my brother has stood up and acknowledged that he made a mistake, and it is not the media that that is the issue. It's the American government, and my brother, stood up and said, I did some things that weren't right, but I'm in the fight, and I still believe there's idealism and hope. We're not here to criticize the media, or we're here to make a statement to the American people. A statement to the American people.
John, can you talk a little bit about the events of yesterday and how the decision came about, when you all were informed of it?
I think we're going to break off in smaller sections. I was not here. Destiny and Eastern Airlines. I went back familiar in a first-hand way with what took place last night, but there are people here who were there, and I'm sure they'll be glad to talk about it. So, Larry, do you want to?
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Larry, do you want to?
Thank you. Thank you.
What was the question?
You've been watching Wednesday's news conference held by Delaware Senator Joseph Biden in Wednesday's confirmation hearing before the Senate Judiciary Committee on the nomination of Judge Robert Bork to the U.S. Supreme Court. So please stay with us.